Democrats have been running on a lottery for 40 years in the state of Alabama. They haven't won for the last 40 years running on a lottery. What makes you think that they're going to win now?
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
One of the biggest stories in Alabama politically right now is that former U.S. Senator Doug Jones is going to be running for governor. Doug Jones won election to the U.S. Senate in 2017, defeating Roy Moore. And so because he has been a U.S. Senator for Alabama in the not too distant past, there is a lot of excitement, among the Democratic, liberal chattering class in the state of Alabama. And, there's... It's really difficult for me to get excited about it for a few reasons. I mean, for one, it is really difficult to imagine Doug Jones winning. That is a difficult thing for me to see. I do want to recognize the terrain is a little bit different than it was in 2020. 2020 was a year where things were pretty close. I think Alabama actually trended a little bit more Republican than it had even in 2016. So, it wasn't the best environment to be running as, and it was in a general election year with the presidency on the ballot. And so, the turnout is big, and when turnout is really, really big in Alabama, the election tends to go more Republican. And so, the turnout was as big as it gets. Even then, only 64% of people vote. Only 64% of registered voters actually come out and vote. And so 2026 is going to be a better year to run as a Democrat than 2020 for a few reasons. For one, it's not a presidential election year. Right. And so you're not going to have that big turnout. And with somebody like Doug Jones, maybe you're able to excite the Democratic electorate a little bit more because they feel like there's a better chance with somebody like him at the top of the ballot. So the turnout is going to be lower. Maybe Doug Jones is going to be able to generate some excitement. And also it will be in the middle of Trump's second term, where he has really very, very quickly eliminated a lot of his goodwill that he got. At the beginning of his second administration, there was a huge sort of culture shift that was really palpable, and a lot of that is gone at this point. He is underwater on every policy issue, particularly with respect to the economy. I think even a majority of Republicans say that they disapprove of his job on the economy at this point. And also it is everything that has happened negative under the Trump administration has been due to his policies. Unlike unlike a lot of other administrations, and even in his first administration, where just frankly, not really that much happened. The Trump administration in his first administration, especially looking back now with part of his second administration in mind, he really ultimately did not do that much. He just did a tax cut for rich people, which was bad and it had negative effects, but ultimately the macro effect on the economy was just not that large. And now we've got these huge tariffs, which have increased prices a little bit, not as much as some people will want to say. He has done so poorly on the immigration issue that the immigration issue, which was the place where he was longest in the positive with respect to his approval rating, is now underwater. Most people at this point disapprove of what he's doing on immigration, which was his best issue. Most people disapprove of what he's doing on the economy. The immigration issue is all him. People are reacting to their lying eyes, as Republicans would want to say. I mean, it's just ultimately you're reacting to what you're seeing, and people don't like it. They don't like that prices. Not only have prices not gone down, which was really never really in the cards, but inflation has actually increased relative to when Biden left office. Not by much, but it has increased. And, you look at what he's done to the federal government, people disapprove of that. And so, anyway, the Trump and Republican approval ratings are really, really low. And so this is just kind of a better environment generally to run as a Democrat. But it's very difficult for me to see Doug Jones winning, especially since, and it's very early, right? He's only been announced for a week, but it does not seem like he is interested in trying anything a little bit different than he did in 2017 or 2020. 2017, the only reason that he won is because Roy Moore tripped, right? And fumbled the ball, or because he was just such a bad Republicans tripped and fumbled the ball by nominating Roy Moore. And so that's what's going to have to happen for him to win the governor's race. And that's why it's important to have a credible candidate in all of these races, right? But it is, it's difficult for me to see him winning. I don't see him doing much introspection about what could I have done differently to win? How am I going to treat this race differently? I just don't see much of that. I do not see much of that. And, and then separately from, can I get excited because I can believe that he's going to win? No, I can't. It's difficult for me to get there. Then there's a second order question of, okay, well, what can his campaign do to improve the terrain for pro-working class politics in the state of Alabama, whether or not he occupies the governor's mansion in January, right? That's a second question. And on that, I am still not. It's still difficult for me to get excited about it because I was reading an article this week. He spent $30 million in 2020. $30 million. And, the terrain is exactly the same in the state of Alabama as it was in 2020. Like, there is nothing different. There was none of that $30 million, as far as I can tell. And, look, I'm local to Huntsville. I'm local to North Alabama. And so, my vision is limited. Okay. I recognize that. And so if somebody has inside information or somebody has visibility on a project that I'm not aware of, feel free to call in 844-899-TVLR. But I don't see anything that Doug Jones has, that the Doug Jones campaign invested in, that has continued to build power or to make the conditions more favorable for pro-working class outcomes, right? I just don't see that. And, at one point I heard him talking about how he was, when he was in the Senate, and this is true, you can go and look it up, he was the most bipartisan senator. There was no other senator during his tenure in the Senate. There was no other senator, Democratic senator, that voted more with Republicans than Doug Jones. And he was like, and it still wasn't good enough. And like that, to me, what that says is that, voting with Republicans as a Democrat is not going to get you a lot of Republican votes. Because if I'm a Republican voter, if I'm a conservative voter, I'm going to just vote for the real McCoy, right? You got to offer, it seems to me, what do I know? But it seems to me that you got to offer something really different. Not, I'm a midway point between these people that you absolutely hate on the left and these people that, you kind of like, or some of the people that you really like on the right. I'm a midway point. Nobody, there's not a constituency for that, except, on, Wall Street and, in the business lobby and stuff like that. But outside of there's just not a constituency for that. You have to offer something different. And does that mean that Doug Jones should run as like an AOC or Zoran Mamdani in Alabama? I think there are things that he can learn from their campaigns, but obviously not, right? I mean, AOC, Zoran Mamdani would get absolutely clobbered in the state of Alabama. I have no illusions about that, right? So I'm not saying that he should run like that, but here is a candidate that I think he could learn from, Dan Osborne. Dan Osborne ran as an independent for U.S. Senate in Nebraska and ran 14 points ahead of Kamala Harris. Doug Jones ran in 2020. He got basically the same as Joe Biden did, right? So he was kind of just basically generic Democrat. Dan Osborne way overperformed Democrats. I mean, Sherrod Brown in Ohio, he overperformed Kamala Harris by like 7 or 8 points, right? So there are, lots of similarities between Ohio, Nebraska, and Alabama. And so there are a lot more things that I think that you could take from Sherrod Brown or Dan Osborne to make to make the race more interesting in the state of Alabama. And I just don't see evidence that Doug Jones is kind of like taking those races into consideration, because he's still talking about, I was one of the most conservative Democrats in the Senate. And so it's like, well, who's that for? Who is that? I don't know. Who's that for? It's not for me. It's certainly not for me, right? But again, I know I don't have illusions that I am the median voter in the state of Alabama. But is that politics for the median voter in the state of Alabama? My humble analysis is that no, it's not. Is that no, the median voter in the state of Alabama is not actually interested in, what is your percentage of voting with respect to Republicans and Democrats? Do you vote 50% with Republicans, 15% with Democrats? No. What my kind of conception of the median voter in the state of Alabama is they want to be able to identify with you in a real, visceral way and believe that you are fighting for them and for the things that occupy, bandwidth in their mind. And for a lot of them, that is unfortunately, in my view, on issues of like immigration and LGBT issues, and they want to see that you're fighting, against immigration. They want to see that you're fighting against LGBT issues, and so but obviously, I don't think that I could not be their fighter on those issues. And so how can I be their fighter in other ways? In what other ways can you appeal to people that you disagree with socially? I think that for one, you can approach them in a way that they don't believe that you're looking down on them in the social setting, and then you can fight for them on economic grounds. And the kitchen table issues is something that conservative Democrats have always kind of talked about. And he is talking about that in his campaign. He's talking about how Alabamians can't afford groceries, can't afford housing, can't afford health care, et cetera, et cetera. He doesn't have any policy platforms on his campaign website yet, which is fine. It's only been like 3 days, right, since he's announced, and so fine, whatever. But the only policies that he is talking about so far in his interviews, in his public in his public things that he's been talking about, has been, one, the overtime tax cut that Democrats in the state of Alabama pushed forward and were able to win, and then Republicans rolled back. And now Trump has adopted it as a policy nationwide, and a lottery. Well, Democrats have been running on a lottery for 40 years in the state of Alabama? They haven't won for the last 40 years running on a lottery. What makes you think that they're going to win now, especially as actually sports gambling has become a real big issue and has had a huge negative effect on young men nationwide? That's not to say that I would oppose a lottery. I still think that we should do a lottery, but the terrain is a little bit different because gambling
now has had a serious negative effect on people's lives across the country. And so is it even as good of a policy as it was when Walt Maddox ran on a lottery 8 years ago? I think probably not. And then the overtime tax cut. That helps a very small subset of people and they like it. But that's not, ultimately, for the vast majority of Alabamians, an overtime tax cut is not going to help them afford health care, housing, or groceries. And so what else do you have to offer? What else are you going to be pushing for if you occupy the governor's mansion? Those are real questions. How do you get people excited about you? How do you get people to believe that you are their champion? Overtime tax cut, a lottery is like, I don't know. So I've been rambling a little bit, but it's like, look. And the people, and there are going to be a lot of Doug Jones folks, or some of them, if they listen to this, they're going to say, well, they're going to disagree with me, and they're going to be excited about him, and think that I'm not seeing what they're seeing. Look, give me a call, 844-899-TVLR, and leave us a voicemail, or call in right now and let us know. Let us know what you think. Where am I missing? I'm always open to suggestions.
Yeah, I have a couple of things to add there. You talked about kind of running to the center and running as this bipartisan moderate approach. And what I found in Alabama elections is that if you're running as a Democrat, you are going to be portrayed as a baby-killing, woke communist.
Yeah.
And that's, irrespective of your record, right? Like, that's just how you're going to be labeled among a significant number of people, including people with a loud microphone. And so, I hear what you're saying, right? Like, is there really a distinct advantage in running to the center instead of, embracing more populist measures? Particularly, you talked about the economics, right? And you're right. Like, I hear folks like Doug Jones and many conservative Democrats, I've heard it my whole life about kitchen table issues. But that's not the same. Like, just saying kitchen table issues doesn't mean you actually have a program to address those issues.
Right.
And so there's always been that kind of disconnect. I think it doesn't resonate with folks because they're not really buying it. Because, basically the status quo with a few tweaks here and there, that's just not really sufficient for the vast majority of us, right? I mean, a couple of other things, that came up was, in terms of can he win, I think, someone pointed out in the comment section that one distinct difference in this election is that a lot of people are feeling pain. There's a lot of pain and disgruntlement out there. And I think historically, an election like 2026 certainly, seems to be a backlash election. It seems to be an election where Democrats do stand to gain a lot. Because historically, the party in charge is going to lose a lot of seats in an election like this, especially with these popularity numbers. Now, whether they take advantage of it is another question, and whether or not the candidates who may see some advantage there, whether they're worth a damn, is also another question. But I do think it's going to be tough because you can look 2017, that special election. It was a special election, for one thing, which means a very different electorate, a very smaller electorate. And Doug Jones was able to get super high turnout among the Democratic base, people of color, progressive whites, young people. And those folks turned out in very, very large numbers. And the Republican base turned out in very low numbers, right? So they had depressed turnout. That was not replicated in 2020. Whether it can be replicated in 2026, I don't know. It being a statewide election, historically, there is a lot less participation. In 2022, the last time we voted for governor, over 60% did not vote. So Kay Ivey won in a landslide, but realistically, only 1 in 4 Alabamians actually voted for her. So, it looks a little different when you think about it that way, but And that's not to say that all the non-voters are just like secret progressives waiting to be tapped. But I think the reality is there's a lot of poor and working class people who are not particularly engaged in politics. And I can kind of understand why, because most politicians aren't really speaking to us and they're not really advancing our interest. And, I think folks can see that a lot of these politicians, and I'm not picking on any in particular, I mean, Alabama ranks at or near the bottom of everything good, right? We rank at or near the top of everything bad. By most metrics, Alabama is one of the worst places to be a working class person in the entire developed world. So the status quo is broken for vast majority of us here in the state. And I think most people recognize that. So I think most people get that. They know we're getting shafted. We know that big companies come down here to get the Alabama discount, and our politicians are in their pocket. And it's, I think there's a demand for change and an opportunity for change. Whether we're going to see that with any of the candidates in 2026 here in Alabama, I don't know. I try not to place a lot of hope in politicians or electoral politics, because looking back in history, people power is how we've won every inch of progress in this country. And, I think that's what we need right now. We're facing many layers of crisis. We need people power, a mass, diverse, organized, working class movement like we haven't seen since the 30s and the 50s and 60s. I think just voting for the right flavor of politician is not enough to address the imbalance of power between the wealthy elites and the rest of us. Elections are important. It is an area where we can express our people power and make an impact. And like I said, because of the nature of life here in Alabama, it's obvious that we, the people, are not getting anything close to what we need from our elected officials. I appreciate anyone who's willing to run for office and put themselves out there. I appreciate that there are some good folks working in that space, but let's also be honest that there are a lot of folks working in electoral politics who are slimy and who do not have our best interest in mind. And I mentioned, like I said, in 2022, over 60% didn't vote. And it didn't help that for a lot of us, the majority of the seats on the ballot weren't even contested. Right? We didn't even have the quantity of candidates we deserved, much less the quality. So the Southern status quo is broken for most of us, but it is working quite well for wealthy, powerful interests. And they rely on division and distraction to cover for their exploitation and extraction. We need candidates who are unapologetically of, by, and for the diverse working class majority. Candidates who will take on the powers that be and fight for a future we can truly believe in. So my challenge to any candidate seeking my support is how will you advance the interests of poor and working class folks, the everyday people? How does your campaign, from the platform to the methods to the funding, how does it relate to us, the working class majority? And if you do win, how do you plan to deliver for us, especially when the system is so stacked against us? So those are some of my thoughts. And again, give us a call. Let us know how you feel.
Hey, 5 seconds. Just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate.
We do have a caller on the line. That caller is from a 256 area code. We'll go ahead and bring them on the air. Dwayne, it's good to hear from you again. Appreciate you calling in. What you got for us?
Hey, Jacob. Hey, Adam. First of all, I just want to mention Stacey Lee George is going to run as an independent candidate. We got to get signatures. Listen, the book, Let Stacey Lee George Do It, is just a regular, average, working person whose land got divided by the county, and he decided to run for office to do something about it. And I wrote the preface, so you should be interested in just since you know me, reading that. Going and reading the preface. Okay, now. But there's something else that's really important going on for the Valley Labor Report can make a very big difference this morning, right now. There are listeners in District 7 of Tennessee, and it is very important. Are you guys familiar with what I'm talking about?
Yes, there is a congressional candidate. There's a congressional race in Tennessee's District 7. It's a special election. The Democrats have nominated Afton Bain, a state representative from Nashville in Tennessee, to be their nominee. She is going up against Republican candidate Matt Van Epps. And supposedly the polls, this is a Republican plus 22 district. Trump won it by 22 points last year. And supposedly the polls have Representative Bain up, or not up, but only down by 2 or 3 points.
Very close. Very close.
Yeah, right. Yeah, two points. Now, and get this, guys. She was formerly a social worker. Okay, She is for prison reform and helping the mentally challenged, and all the things. Most of the things that I would be for, Miss Bain is for. Okay, so they are getting kind of worried. You know, they're sending in J.D. Vance tomorrow to try to help Van Epps. Have you got me?
I
know
knew
that?
the Republicans were funneling millions of dollars into the district. I did not know that Vance was coming down.
Right. And listen, all of her donations are under $200, and they're individual people and along the lines of individual people, where theirs are the big money people. And so going just above Athens, I want to say there, you've got 2 counties that are in your listening range that can be hearing us right now, that can hear the importance of going and voting. And listen, it's more of the potential rural vote of the Tennesseans that she's likely to pick up, because the district got changed to make a balance between Nashville and the other areas. You got me there? Like a whole restructuring. So us talking about this right now and informing people and saying, get out to vote for Bain, okay, because that's going to change the structure of the House vote. Can you explain that to everyone? The Democrats will be 1 person closer in votes, which is very important. That's why so much money is getting spent on the Republican side.
Right.
That's right. They don't have many votes to lose, and they don't have, many strong majorities on certain issues, right? There's already enough signatures on the discharge petition for both Protect America's Workforce Act and the Epstein files, right, which we have already seen that going through. So, yeah, every race is going to be really important. I'm glad you mentioned that, because you're right. We do have some folks in Tennessee. Hope everybody is ready for the election and paying attention for sure. I know this is going to be middle and West Tennessee. Yes, and listen, here's something you might want to research. HUD funding is going to end for a lot of major cities, and there will be people that become homeless, that they're setting up a place to either consider them drug addicts or mentally something wrong with them, to send them to what is potentially tents when they kick them out of their HUD because HUD is not being funded. Have you got me there? And remember what I told you about 3 months ago? The legislature made laws that you couldn't be walking on the state highway. The city of Montgomery made it where you can't even be homeless in their city limits, and something must be done. But if by the same token, from 140 to, I want to say, around 170,000 people minimum will become homeless this summer when the big beautiful bill lets them do this. Look up what I'm saying. And listen, please, let Stacey Lee George do it. It's a book. I wrote the preface. It tells about how he started. My first cousin was his dad that lost his legs, and a family member died and left him property. But the county laws made it where you couldn't divide the property, and it would become the county's instead of his inheritance. That's why he even got into politics and changed all of Morgan County, and wants to do that for the whole state by stopping nepotism and cronyism. And he would have team members. You know, guys, you could even suggest who you would want to be a team member to deal with the labor for me, and I guarantee you that person would be looked at to be a person on that
committee. So this is beyond what the other two are talking about. This is actually action.
Quirky Geek Girl says about Doug Jones, he sounds like the old corporate Democrat, or am I reading his wiki wrong? Yeah, no, I mean, that's basically kind of it. You know, funny enough, when he was first elected, I was in college, and I was really active in the college Democrats. Father, forgive me for I have sinned. And I knocked on like hundreds of doors for him. And subsequent to that, one of the things that I was really upset about was he voted in favor of some banking deregulation. It overturned portions of Glass-Steagall, and I can't recall exactly what it did, but I was very upset about it. And so I actually had the UAH College Democrats, along with several other like Democratic and left-wing organizations across the state, sign an open letter to him, and it was published in AL.com. The Intercept interviewed us about it, and we eventually, he did comment on it, and he just dismissed us and said, you know, we don't know anything and blah, 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 which is great. But to be fair to Doug Jones, you know, He did some good stuff in there. He did not vote in favor of some abortion bans that came up that was a political stunt. He didn't vote in favor of Amy Coney Barrett, Trump's Supreme Court justice. He also had a labor liaison. I think he was the first U.S. senator from the state of Alabama to actually have a labor liaison to talk to have a direct connection to the labor movement and get an idea of what our issues were. But then on the other side, he also was not a co-sponsor to the PRO Act while he was in the Senate, and Richard Trumka actually made a special trip to the Alabama AFL-CIO convention to rip him apart for that. But then also, to be fair to Doug Jones, he was like, look, guys, if it comes up for a vote, you know, I would vote for it, but I'm not going to co-sponsor it because, like, it's not going to come up for a vote, and even if it did, it's not going to pass, and so what's the point? But then on the other side, it's like, what Republican voter in the state of Alabama was going to vote for Doug Jones but wouldn't if he would have co-sponsored the PRO Act? The answer to that question is zero, but the answer to the real, actually probably relevant question is what businesses or corporations or rich people maybe gave him $100,000 or something that wouldn't have given him that money if he had co-sponsored the PRO Act. Now, maybe there's something to that, but, you know, I don't know. But so, you know, I mean, yeah, he's kind of a garden variety Democrat, I think is the long and short of it.
Right. I mean, basically, you're being posed with a choice. Do you want a competent moderate or a drooling reactionary? I think is, and they're just banking on that being an easy enough choice for folks. And, well, we'll see. We'll see.
Didn't George, Free American asks if George started out as a Republican, Stacey Lee George running for governor as an independent. Yes, he started out as a Republican, but my understanding is that he was always sort of an outlier, I think.
Yeah, more of an independent-minded.
He said, Free American may be more familiar with George than I am. He said he was a fighter in Morgan County and Republican bosses hated him. And then there was a question about gerrymandering in Alabama. Actually, Alabama, particularly as it relates to the Congress, I think the state legislature is a little bit worse, but the Congress in Alabama is not quite as gerrymandered as some other states. We have 7 seats, and 2 of them are Democratic. 5 of them are Republican, which comes kind of close to the states, how the state votes. It's like 28% Democrat in our U.S. House delegation, and they're like 35% of the state votes for Democrats. So it's pretty close. And if you added one more seat to the Democrats would be overrepresented actually. So I think the U.S. House map is fair, more or less.
Yeah, there's I believe a state Senate district that's currently subject to some court rulings right now. So I think the state legislature map will be a little different, but we'll see.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.
Which side are you on?